Welcome back to Inside City Hall. At the beginning of the year, Mayor de Blasio unveiled an ambitious plan to create a streetcar known as the Brooklyn-Queens Connector. It would link neighborhoods along the Brooklyn and Queens waterfronts. But can the mayor get the needed community support to make this streetcar a reality? Joining me now to discuss this and more as we continue our conversation about transit issues in the city are three city council members who represent neighborhoods along some of the proposed routes. We have Carlos Menchaca, Jimmy Van Bramer, and Stephen Levin. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it, gentlemen. And let's start with some basic questions. When is this sucker going to be open? I think a lot of people are excited about taking a streetcar.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer is 2024 if everything goes the way the mayor is planning it. So this is the long-term project that we're talking about here. But I think for communities, we're really feeling it in the immediate nature and is causing a lot of concerns around gentrification, jobs, and really the full promise of this rail line. This starts up in Queens and goes down to Sunset Park, where I represent.
Or it starts in Sunset Park and goes up in Queens. Well, before we talk about those big issues, because it has raised a lot of issues about gentrification and about cost. Remind us, how is this thing going to work? Is it going to be in traffic? Is it going to be a dedicated lane, separate lights?
I think the truth is we don't know yet the answer to a lot of those questions. They are proposing a series of routes, and so that is one of the discussion points that we are currently engaged in. In my district in Long Island City, for example, there are 3 possible routes, all of which, though, would entail significant disruption in terms of construction and traffic redirection. And in some ways, there's a decision yet to be made about where a bridge will be built from Councilmember Levin's district to my district, connecting the two. Where a proposed bridge gets built has obviously direct impact on which route and which streets they ultimately go down. So I think for me, there is a lot of questions to be answered, many more questions than answers at this point, and so it's hard to deliver a final verdict on the BQX because we just don't know.
Are you a fan of the BQX?
I think that it has some real potential benefits. My district has been significantly rezoned over the last 15 years. In downtown Brooklyn, Greenpoint, Williamsburg. We're just seeing a lot of that development happening now and over the last 5 years. And in a lot of ways, it's the transportation networks, the public transportation networks, never quite caught up to that development. So many people in Brooklyn and Queens take the G train to get from one end of Brooklyn to the other, and that it's not really sufficient and doesn't really cover a lot of neighborhoods. And so I have a lot of constituents that may work in downtown Brooklyn but live in Williamsburg Greenpoint or vice versa. It's very difficult to get from one end to the other. We have the ferry system now. That's a very light impact system, but it also doesn't run with the frequency that it really needs to be able to be a fully effective system of transportation really from one end of the line to the other. And ultimately, it's important to have some kind of redundancy and stops along the way.
Yeah, as you've seen that because of what's happened with Hurricane Sandy. I mean, the L train in your district is going to be out of service for a while, so you do want that redundancy. Let's talk about those big picture issues. At the face of it, people want to have more transit options, right? And this is going to be the cost of a Metro card, we've been told. So why are people not a fan of it?
Well, look, there's a real cry for better transportation options, no doubt, and you're seeing development happen on the waterfront. But I think there's some real deeper questions about how this line really connects to other issues that we're facing, like rising rents in our communities. So when we see these like fancy infrastructure that comes in, we have to question, and especially in my district, which is very different from Steve's district, where we have a robust industrial manufacturing district that will be affected in some way. And so we're still waiting. There's going to be a report in March that really talks about how this is going to get financed. But my community is really coming up with really good questions about how this is going to affect not only the rents in the residential, but also the speculation in the industrial and commercial property. And those properties are flipping 2 or 3 times in the year, going up and skyrocketing throughout my district.
I mean, much of the city is hot, but you guys in particular live in some hot neighborhoods. And I guess it doesn't help the skepticism when you see a report like in the Daily News that some developers who have property that would run along this route have given a lot of money to Mayor de Blasio's campaign for One New York. Do you also have that skepticism in your district?
Well, look, I think people saw the Daily News piece, and obviously it raises some concerns. But you know, I don't believe that this is being proposed because folks gave money to the campaign for One New York.
And the mayor has, I should say, the mayor has also defended his actions on this and other questions that we've raised.
Correct. But to get to the larger point, right, which is we are all for more transportation options, and I'm a huge proponent of mass transit. But this is a $2.5 billion taxpayer-funded investment. And for me, this is about priorities. I am not against this system. But if we have $2.5 billion, for those of us in Queens in particular, the 7 train going east to west is so clogged, maybe it's better to invest the $2.5 billion in the infrastructure that we currently have, which is crumbling, like the 52nd Street Woodside 7 train stop. And we all know that select bus service and other bus service is cheaper, and we could get it ahead of the deadline that Carlos just talked about.
And Jimmy's absolutely right. Our communities didn't ask for this train. This is not coming from the grassroots effort. And I think there's an opportunity that the mayor has actually created for us to talk about all the options and actually compare them along the line. And so that's something that we need the mayor to do. I've asked, for example, for community sessions to be in Chinese only. I have a huge Chinese community, and Spanish only. I have a huge Latino community. Those discussions have to happen because not enough people know that this is on its way as a discussion and as a planning operation and in a planning exercise.
Right, or at least bilingual sessions, I would imagine.
One of the challenges I'd like to add that about working with the MTA, frankly, is that that's a city-state partnership, and a lot of it is controlled by the state. And so this has the benefit of being a purely city project.
Well, does de Blasio, does the mayor just want to have this as his own baby and not have to share it with the MTA?
No, I don't think that that's the point. I think that when there's one cook in the kitchen, if you will, there's when it's a city project, obviously working with communities and working with elected officials, but more importantly working with those that we represent, which is neighborhood organizations and tenant associations, but not having to go through a separate level of bureaucracy and funding allocations with the MTA, I think does have its benefits.
But that comes with problems too. We don't have any guarantee that this is going to integrate to the MTA system. We know fare hikes are on their way. So for the 40,000 people, NYCHA residents that live along the line, they're going to be having to pay a higher hike, pay hike on their MTA card, and then a separate system for this rail line. That's a huge problem.
Well, another problem that I see is that if this streetcar, if it exists, if it's just going to be sitting in traffic, then it's not particularly better. Is there also talk about coupling this with some restrictions on private cars?
Well, I mean, I'll just say from the briefings that I've had, look, there are advantages and disadvantages to a system like this. One of the disadvantages is that it is a big system that is built and sits right on top of 21st Street or 11th Street or Vernon Boulevard in my district. And cars and buses can't go around a trolley, right? It stops. Some of them go only 10 miles an hour. So there are real issues. Whether or not it would be coupled with reductions or redirects of traffic, I think all of that is on the table and something that the city is considering.
Sorry for the bad pun, but that's also a third rail here. All right, well, a lot to discuss, but a lot of it is in the future. We're going to take a quick break now and talk about some bigger picture items when we return. I'll be back with these 3 city council members in just a moment. Stay with us.